You're on 88.9 FM, listening to Leading Education. I'm Cheryl Lacey, and we've had a remarkable show so far. Extraordinary guests change of pace now. Our final guest for today, Sam Belfield, is a volunteer from the World Transformation Movement, and he's got a genuine interest in the human condition, which is something that was established by the works of Jeremy Griffith, a biologist. And one of Sam's interests, or a key interest of Sam, as a result of reading that book, also stems from his work and life in regional Victoria, and particularly it applies to farmers and fathers who are doing it tough and continue to do it tough regionally, and the impact that has on their families. Welcome to the show, Sam Belfield.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for having me, and appreciate the introduction.
Sam, you wear many hats, I know. Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day work life.
Well, I can certainly do that. As you mentioned, I'm a volunteer / director for the World Transformation Movement. It's a non-for-profit organisation set up to, look into and research the issue of the human condition, and that's something we can chat about, and in particular sort of promote and distribute the work of Australian biologist Jeremy Griffith. I should mention I'm actually from regional New South Wales rather than regional Victoria, but originally, but that's not a drama. I just thought I'd feed that in. And in terms of, by way of a quick background, I'm aged 50, a little bit more now. When I was at university many moons ago, I grew up on a sheep and cattle property. I was studying at university, doing an ag science, rural science degree, and was very much enjoying myself. I wasn't looking for sort of the so-called deeper answers to the bigger questions in life, but at that point we were sort of obviously in a university degree context, we were looking at the problems in agriculture. And then at that point, I read a book by Jeremy Griffith, an earlier book called Beyond the Human Condition. And I suppose the light bulb moment was for me that, to put it in a nutshell, his book explains sort of why humans, in particular men, are good or fundamentally worthwhile, in heroic. Now that's sort of quite probably a bit to unpack in that, but what I'm sort of getting at is that we were sort of looking at agriculture and sort of through a fairly narrow lens in terms of what the problems are, but what was, I suppose, a light bulb moment was this biologist, Jeremy Griffith, sort of talking about the psychological dimension of, what the practical problems in agriculture, and then taking a wider lens, the human relationships and, what people are actually dealing with, why we make the decisions that we do. And for me, this concept of the human condition began to make immense sense of that. And rather than being sort of confused and critical about what was going on, for me, all of a sudden I was able to sort of become immensely sort of excited and compassionate in seeing that, look, there is an underlying reason why we make all sorts of poor decisions, why we're living with the distress and anxiety that we are. And per the name of the book at that point, it's sort of saying, look, we suffer as a species from this issue called the human condition, which we'll talk about. But through understanding that, we can actually move beyond it. So it's not just simply identifying a problem. It's saying, look, there's an elephant in the room, if you like, that we can now sort of safely open up and discuss and talk about. And better still, we can, through bringing insight to it, we can move beyond that condition. We can heal it and rehabilitate the human situation, or specifically the human condition. So that's a little bit of a sense of why I became supportive, and I've been supporting Jeremy's work sort of for the 30 plus years since then.
Indeed, and as a biologist, a lot of his research had come from, the Darwinism and the way in which we've evolved, as a species. And some of the, I suppose, I suggest that it would be DNA that we still hold on to, which is all around, if you look at the common wisdom and so forth, if you believe in the Darwin theory, that there was that hierarchy and power struggle between, I suppose, different groups of animals, and perhaps even were between them for food or for, mateship and so forth. And that evolution has come into our DNA and our way of being. Is that sort of a bit what the human condition is all about?
Well, look, it's a very much a key point you raised, but Jeremy has a very much a fundamentally different take on why we are, why we, for example, have got a capacity for war, brutality, inhumanity, and certainly what you've outlined, that is a prevailing view in biology and in science. And on a sort of at one level, when you sort of turn on the television and you see dramatic footage of, competent chimpanzees, brutally sort of competing for mating opportunities and what have you. On one view, there's a reason to think that there's substance to that narrative. But I think this is one of the key aspects of Jeremy's work, is suggesting that the reason that we are, if you like, competitive, brutal and aggressive as a species, that is, in humans, is due to a psychological reason. And so Jeremy's actually suggesting that, and this is sort of very much fundamental to understanding our human condition, is that Jeremy sort of, if you like, is turning it on its head and saying, no, look, our deeper instincts, our instinctual heritage as a species is to be cooperative, loving and selfless. And there's a depth of scientific reference material and research to support that. In particular, that we often see the behaviour of the common chimpanzees highlighted, but there's another one of our very close cousins called the bonobos, or otherwise referred to as the pygmy chimpanzees. Now they're highly cooperative. They're matriarchal. They're highly social, cooperative. There's very much a focus on nurturing of the infants. Now, to sort of put it in an abbreviated form, Jeremy sets out a treatise that, from some sort of about 12 million years ago to 2 million years ago, our species was incredibly loving, selfless and cooperative. And I won't go into the detail of that, but that's the sort of the fundamental proposition. And we would suggest, or Jeremy would suggest, that that's what gave rise to our moral conscience. So, we would all relate to that in the sense that we've got this innate dimension of ourselves that actually values and, in a sense, celebrates being kind, empathetic, caring and loving. We've got concepts like values and ethics, virtue, and we obviously regularly refer to a moral conscience. So Jeremy's suggesting that we've actually got this, as a species, this instinctual heritage of being cooperative, loving and selfless. But what actually happened some 2 million years ago is our fully conscious mind emerged, our intellect. And that, at that point, there resulted in a conflict between our instincts, which were sort of, in a sense, calling us to be cooperative and loving and selfless, and this newly emerged mind that is managing from a basis of insight or reason or self-management. And that resulted in a conflict, and in effect where these instincts criticised our newly emerging mind. And that resulted in the mind becoming embattled, feeling insecure. In a sense, it was needing to deviate from the instructions or the voice of our instincts in order to fulfil this new conscious thinking potential. But that inner conflict resulted in what Jeremy refers to as a psychosis, where there's this deep-seated sense of sort of guilt, shame, insecurity about our worth. And what our mind did at that point in time is it sort of had to repel and retaliate against that implied, undeserved sense of guilt. And the main characteristics of that relief, if you like, was anger, egocentricity and alienation. So the subtlety being there is that we're not in the context of common chimps, they don't have a fully conscious mind. It is true that, consistent with the concept of natural selection, and there's an imperative there to reproduce genes, that is what gives rise to dominance, hierarchy, competing for mating opportunities and what have you. Whereas in the context of our species, the unique difference is we've got this fully conscious mind, the ability to, self-manage over an unbelievable, amount of time. We've put a man on the moon, for example. That's the level of our intellectual faculty. But the reason for our upset, if you like, our divisiveness, our capacity for destructiveness, and if you look at the words we use, like narcissism, delusion, jealousy, envy, and you look at our behaviour, I think we all actually know that it's not something that's innate to us. It's actually something. It's like we're mentally disturbed. We've got we've got a sort of a psychological illness or sickness, and Jeremy's the crux of his treatise is saying, look, this is why this conflict emerged between our instinct and our intellect. That gave rise to this psychosis. If we can now understand why that's happened, that psychosis can subside, and our psychologically derived competitive divisive behaviour can actually subside. So I'm more than happy to unpack that a bit more, but I'll try and keep it as brief as I can, Cheryl.
Yeah, sure. Sam, the first word that comes to mind in all that you're discussing there is well-being. And, we have, to simplify it, and correct me if I'm wrong here, all the discussion you're having around the human condition and how we've evolved and how our conscience and consciousness came into being, which caused some conflict for us. We are all a people who have both positive and negative feelings, if you want to put it that way.
Yep.
However, some of those negative feelings are there for a good reason and good cause, because we are finding our place, just as everybody else is. So there will be conflict, and look, in all that we discuss, and this is why leading education is here at the show, it's about listening, and it's about debating respectfully, so that everyone does have that personal fulfilment, but more importantly, that self-fulfilling opportunities based on their choices and opportunities in life.
Yeah, absolutely, Cheryl.
So where does that impact on regional? I know we had a conversation last week regarding the plight of a lot of farmers and men in particular, and the struggles that they face. Is there an isolation component there? So even though there is an opportunity for discussion for city folk, if you will, and people in townships, is isolation a big issue for our farmers?
Yeah, I think that would be definitely my view. I mean, it's a very absolutely. I mean, it's a very unique lifestyle, and it's got unbelievable attributes, and people obviously are attracted to it for that reason. But coming to your sort of point, I think there is a dimension there where it's probably recognised in terms of some of the the severe mental health challenges people have got, but because there's not necessarily that structure there, and obviously that's something in the modern context where a lot's being done to sort of try and build those sort of community relationships and what have you, that where people can sort of share what they're going through. But in the context of my sort of the work I'm supporting, I suppose the dimension that can complement that or bring something to it is suggesting of what is this sort of deeper dimension that at an everyday level, we might talk about people experiencing sort of the black dog or demons in terms of the difficulties, negative thought patterns or self-talk. And I think that for me, the missing, having experienced elements of that in my life, what I feel like is at the bottom of the wood heap there in terms of what's driving some of those that self-doubt, that insecurity, and it links in very much with what you're talking about, a sense of meaning and fulfilment, is that when you start, if you let your mind slow down and you start to try and contemplate, well, what is it that I'm doing with my life? What am I trying to achieve? We're very much geared to sort of looking at that through the prism of what we're, practically achieving, whether we're succeeding, whether, what we're doing sort of at a practical level. But I'm suggesting there's this, at a human journey level, what we've actually been trying to do is find sufficient knowledge to reconcile this deeper dilemma we've got, which is if we look inside ourselves, simplistically, it's a case of, look, am I fundamentally worthwhile or not? Or put another way, in the context of, say, a man, and I'm aged 50, you can look inside yourself and you see aspects of, what we'd sort of every day you'd sort of think of your dark side in terms of capacity for brutality, cruelty, competitiveness, jealousy, and that's you're sort of there's this sort of burden that I think in particular men are living with about, and there's this sense of being misunderstood in terms of, and I suggest that's one of the reasons that men struggle to open up, because if they were to sort of talk about at a deeper level some of the aspects of themselves, then there's very much an assumption that that's going to attract criticism or further condemnation of this sort of bigger issue that's there of, well, am I fundamentally worthwhile or not? And what is significant about, I suppose, the work I'm supporting is it's bringing explanation and compassion to that. Yes, it's not just affirming, okay, we are good, we're worthwhile, you're a good person. It's actually saying, look, yes, we all, as a species, we are immensely upset. So it's taking account of this darkness, this dimension of ourselves that is upset, and it's not judging it as bad. It's not criticising it. That's the key subtly, is it's actually saying, no, look, there's actually a really good reason. Stepping back from just at the individual level, as a species, we are immensely psychologically upset, and there's a good reason for that. And we can actually now, rather than being condemning of that, we can be compassionate and explaining. And so that lifts that. There can, in a sense, almost be for the first time a real conversation about what is, when we sort of use language like, men are living under the hammer, are living under this burden of self-judgment. I think I'd like to suggest that at the bottom of the wood heap, it's this issue of the human condition, and if we can now safely open that up, we can alleviate that burden that men are psychologically living with.
Yep, fantastic. And so we've got the World Transformation Movement, Sam Belfield talking about the human condition, and the work of biologist Jeremy Griffith. Sam, it's been terrific to have you on the show. You're bringing light to the dark, looking inside all of it and saying it's okay, because we always know that the light is stronger and light is good stuff to overcome that darkness. But having said that, the dark will always be there inside it in some way, shape or form. So we are being and becoming. That's what Sam's message is for us today. So look out for Sam in future shows here on 88.9 FM. Thank you for joining us today, Sam.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Really appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure, and we'll be talking to you very much soon.
Talk soon.